The command deck of the Terran diplomatic vessel Harmony hummed with nervous energy as Chief Engineer Marcus Reid made his final adjustments to the specially designed conference room. 3 days of preparation had led to this moment, the first formal diplomatic meeting between humanity and the Zelithian Empire, a proud feline species that controlled a significant portion of the Outer Rim territories. Marcus wiped his hands on his work coveralls, surveying the elegant meeting space. The room featured a perfectly balanced blend of human and Zelithian design elements, from the warm amber lighting that mimicked their homeworld's twin suns to the raised platform where the Zelithian delegation would sit. Everything had to be perfect. One cultural misstep could doom the peace negotiations before they even began. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Reid report, came the crisp voice of Captain Sarah Chun over the comm system. Conference room ready, Captain, Marcus replied, checking his tablet one final time. All systems green. The environmental controls are calibrated for Zelithian physiology, and the translation matrix is running at optimal efficiency. Excellent work, Chief. The Zelithian fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. 8 of 15 minutes. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. 15 minutes until first contact with one of the galaxy's most formidable military powers. The Zelithians had agreed to these talks only after months of careful diplomatic overtures, and their reputation for pride and honor made them notoriously difficult to negotiate with. The Harmony shuddered slightly as the massive Zelithian dreadnought Starfire moved into position alongside them. Through the conference room's reinforced windows, Marcus could see the sleek, predatory lines of the alien vessel. It was beautiful in its deadly efficiency, like a great cat preparing to pounce. Incoming transmission from the Zelithian flagship, announced Lieutenant Torres from the bridge. They're requesting permission to come aboard. Granted, Captain Chun responded. All department heads to the conference room. Reid, that includes you. Marcus straightened his uniform and made his way to the designated meeting area. As the ship's chief engineer, he'd been selected for the delegation partly for his technical expertise, but mostly because his calm demeanor and problem-solving skills made him valuable in tense situations. The other members of the human delegation were already assembled when he arrived. Captain Chun stood at the head of the conference table, her dress uniform immaculate. Ambassador Williams, the lead negotiator, shuffled through his notes with barely concealed anxiety. Dr. Sarah Kim, the xenobiologist, was reviewing her cultural briefings on her tablet. Remember, Captain Chun addressed the group, the Zelithians value strength and directness. They see excessive politeness as weakness. Be respectful but firm. And whatever you do, don't make any sudden movements. Their predatory instincts are still quite strong. The airlock hissed open, and the Zelithian delegation entered. Marcus felt his breath catch as he got his first look at humanity's newest potential allies. They were magnificent creatures, standing nearly 7 feet tall with sleek, muscular builds. Their fur ranged from deep golden to rich amber, and their eyes gleamed with intelligence and barely contained power. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But it was their leader who truly commanded attention. Admiral Zareth Moonwhisper entered the room with the fluid grace of a natural predator, her silver-touched fur marking her as a high-ranking member of Zelithian society. She wore a ceremonial uniform that managed to look both elegant and intimidating, with subtle armor plating that suggested she was as much warrior as diplomat. Her amber eyes swept the room, cataloging every detail with the precision of a military commander. When her gaze fell on Marcus, he felt an unexpected jolt of recognition. Not that he'd seen her before, but something in her bearing reminded him of the great cats he'd studied in Earth's nature preserves. I am Admiral Zareth Moonwhisper of the Zelithian Imperial Fleet, she announced, her voice carrying a subtle purring undertone that the translation matrix couldn't quite eliminate. I speak for the Empire in these negotiations. Captain Chun stepped forward. Welcome aboard the Harmony, Admiral. I am Captain Sarah Chun, Commanding Officer. May I present our delegation? The introductions proceeded smoothly, with each human representative offering a brief bow of respect. When it came to Marcus's turn, Admiral Zareth's eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than the others. Chief Engineer, she said, her head tilting slightly in what he recognized as a gesture of curiosity. Your reputation precedes you. I have heard of your innovative work with cross-species technology integration. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Thank you, Admiral. I look forward to learning about Zelithian engineering techniques. A flash of what might have been approval crossed her features before she moved to take her seat at the conference table. The other Zelithian delegates followed suit, their movements coordinated and precise. That's when Marcus noticed the problem. Admiral Zareth's chair, a specially designed piece meant to accommodate Zelithian physiology, was clearly malfunctioning. The back support was stuck at an awkward angle, and the seat height was completely wrong for her frame. But she sat anyway, her posture rigid with the effort of maintaining her dignity despite the obvious discomfort. Marcus watched as she tried to subtly adjust the chair, her ears flattening slightly in frustration. To anyone else, her discomfort might have been invisible, but Marcus had spent years reading the subtle signs of mechanical stress in both machines and people. The negotiations began with Ambassador Williams outlining the proposed trade agreements. Marcus tried to focus on the discussions, but his engineer's mind kept drifting to the Admiral's predicament. He could see the strain in her shoulders, the way she had to consciously prevent herself from shifting position. As the talks progressed, Admiral Zareth's contributions became increasingly terse. Her earlier diplomatic warmth faded, replaced by clipped, professional responses. The other Zelithian delegates began exchanging concerned glances. Marcus recognized the signs. He'd seen them in countless engineering meetings where a small technical problem had gradually poisoned the entire discussion. The Admiral's physical discomfort was affecting her mood, which in turn was influencing the entire negotiation. During a brief recess, while the other delegates mingled and exchanged pleasantries, Marcus made his decision. He approached Admiral Zareth, who was standing stiffly beside her chair, clearly reluctant to sit back down. Admiral, he said quietly, I couldn't help but notice that your chair seems to be malfunctioning. Would you permit me to take a look at it? Her amber eyes flashed with what might have been embarrassment. The chair is adequate, Chief Engineer. With respect, Admiral, I can see that it's not. The servo mechanisms appear to be stuck, and the height adjustment is clearly calibrated incorrectly for your frame. He gestured to the chair with professional authority. It would take me less than 5 minutes to fix. Admiral Zareth's tail, which had been held stiffly behind her, began to twitch with agitation. I do not require assistance with furniture, human. Marcus recognized the pride speaking, the same pride that had nearly prevented the negotiations from happening at all. He took a different approach. Admiral, in my experience, mechanical failures have a way of getting worse over time. What's a minor adjustment now could become a major malfunction later. As an engineer, I'd feel responsible if I didn't at least offer to prevent that. She studied him for a long moment, her predatory instincts clearly evaluating his sincerity. Finally, she gave a curt nod. Very well, but quickly. Marcus knelt beside the chair, pulling out the basic toolkit he always carried. The problem was immediately obvious. The servo motors had become misaligned during transport, probably due to the different gravitational forces aboard the human ship. It was a simple fix, but one that required precise calibration. As he worked, he was acutely aware of Admiral Zareth standing beside him, her presence both intimidating and oddly comforting. Her scent, a warm, spicy fragrance that reminded him of cinnamon and starlight, was unexpectedly pleasant. "The servo alignment is off by about 12 degrees, he murmured as he made the adjustments. "Probably happened during the gravitational transition when you came aboard. These Zelithian designs are beautiful, but they're sensitive to environmental changes. You are familiar with our engineering principles." There was surprise in her voice. "I make it a point to study the technology of any species we encounter. Your people's approach to biomechanical integration is remarkable. The way you've designed furniture that adapts to individual physiology is far beyond anything we've achieved." Marcus felt rather than saw her posture relax slightly. "You have studied our designs?" "Every technical manual I could get my hands on. The theoretical frameworks alone are fascinating. Your people understand the relationship between form and function in ways that humans are just beginning to appreciate." He made one final adjustment to the height mechanism, then activated the chair's systems. The various components hummed to life, adjusting smoothly to their proper positions. "There," Marcus said, standing and stepping back. "Try it now." Admiral Zareth approached the chair cautiously, her natural wariness evident. But as she settled into the seat, her entire posture transformed. The chair molded itself to her frame, supporting her spine at exactly the right angle and adjusting the height, so her feet rested comfortably on the floor dot, and then it happened. A low, rumbling sound emerged from deep in her chest, a sound of pure contentment and relief. It was unmistakably a purr, rich and resonant, and it seemed to fill the entire conference room. "Admiral." Zareth's eyes went wide with horror as she realized what had happened. The sound cut off abruptly, but the damage was done. Every person in the room, human and Zelithian alike, had heard it. She began, her voice tight with mortification. Marcus felt his heart go out to her. In that moment, he saw past the proud military commander to the individual underneath, someone who had been suffering in silence rather than admit to discomfort, and who had just experienced such relief that her natural instincts had overcome her careful control. "That's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Admiral Zareth stared at him, her amber eyes reflecting a mixture of shock and something that might have been gratitude. "Chief Engineer Reid," Captain Chin said carefully, "perhaps we should resume the negotiations?" But Marcus was focused entirely on the Admiral, who was struggling to regain her composure. He could see the conflict in her features, the shame of having shown what she probably considered weakness warring with the obvious relief of finally being comfortable. "Admiral," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "there's nothing to be embarrassed about. You were in pain, and now you're not. That's what matters. Zelithian commanders do not show weakness," she said stiffly, but her voice lacked conviction. "That wasn't weakness," Marcus replied. "That was honesty. And in my experience, honest reactions are worth more than any amount of diplomatic protocol." Around them, the other delegates were beginning to resume their conversations, though Marcus noticed that several of the humans were watching the exchange with interest. More importantly, the other Zelithian delegates seemed to be relaxing as well, their earlier tension fading. Admiral Zareth settled back into her chair, and Marcus saw her features soften slightly as the furniture continued to adjust to her needs. "You have blue quote," she paused, searching for words. "You have done me a great kindness, Chief Engineer." "Just doing my job, Admiral, making sure the equipment works properly." A small smile curved her lips, the first genuine expression of warmth he'd seen from her. "Is that what you call it?" "That's what I call it," Marcus confirmed. "Though I have to admit, your chair's design is impressive. The way it reads biomechanical stress patterns and adjusts accordingly. We have nothing that sophisticated in human technology." "Perhaps," Admiral Zareth said, her tone becoming more conversational. "We might discuss a technical exchange as part of these negotiations." The formal talks resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Admiral Zareth's earlier stiffness was gone, replaced by engaged participation and occasional moments of what Marcus could only describe as playful humor. The other Zelithian delegates followed her lead, and soon the conference room was filled with productive discussion rather than cautious, diplomatic maneuvering. Marcus found himself stealing glances at the Admiral throughout the session. She moved with fluid grace in her properly adjusted chair, her natural charisma shining through now that she was comfortable. More than once, he caught her looking at him with what seemed like curious assessment. When the session ended, the delegates began to disperse, but Admiral Zareth lingered. As the room emptied, she approached Marcus. "Chief Engineer," she said, "I find myself in your debt." "No debt, Admiral. Just one engineer helping another." Her amber eyes studied him intently. "You consider me an engineer, aren't you?" "Anyone who understands technology well enough to design a chair like that has to have serious engineering knowledge." Admiral Zareth's tail swished with what Marcus was learning to recognize as pleasure. "I did indeed design that chair. It was one of my projects before I entered military service full-time. I thought so. The integration of comfort and functionality was too elegant to be accidental." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You are not what I expected from a human engineer. What did you expect?" "Someone more mechanical, less intuitive. Your people's reputation suggests a focus on brute force solutions rather than elegant ones." Marcus chuckled. "We're not all hammers looking for nails, Admiral. Some of us prefer finesse." "Indeed." Her voice carried that subtle purring undertone. Again, though she seemed unaware of it. "I wonder, would you be interested in seeing the Starfire's engineering section? I believe you would find our approaches to power distribution quite fascinating." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. An invitation to tour a Zelithian warship was unprecedented, a sign of trust that went far beyond diplomatic protocol. "I would be honored, Admiral." "Excellent. And perhaps you might call me Zareth. We are, after all, colleagues now." As she left the conference room, Marcus realized that something fundamental had shifted. What had started as a simple mechanical repair had somehow become the foundation for something much more significant. He had no idea that their brief exchange had been monitored by the Starfire's communications array, and that Admiral Zareth's involuntary purr had been broadcast to every ship in the Zelithian fleet. Nor did he know that the implications of that moment would ripple through both species' military hierarchies in ways that would change the course of human-Zelithian relations forever. All he knew was that he had helped someone in need, and in doing so, had glimpsed the remarkable individual behind the formidable military commander. As he prepared to return to his duties, Marcus found himself looking forward to their next encounter with an anticipation that had nothing to do with diplomatic protocols or engineering exchanges. The negotiations would continue, but something new had begun, something that would prove far more important than any formal treaty. The transport shuttle hummed quietly as it carried Marcus from the Harmony to the massive Zelithian dreadnought Starfire. Through the viewport, he watched the alien vessel grow larger, its sleek hull plates gleaming like polished obsidian. The ship's design was both beautiful and intimidating, all curves and flowing lines that suggested deadly efficiency. Admiral Zareth sat across from him, her posture relaxed in a way that contrasted sharply with her earlier rigidity. The properly functioning chair had clearly made more difference than Marcus had initially realized. "Your ship is magnificent," Marcus said, genuinely impressed by the vessel's elegant proportions. "She is the pride of the Third Fleet," Zareth replied, and Marcus caught that subtle purring undertone in her voice again. "Designed for both speed and firepower, with living spaces that accommodate our physiological needs." "Living spaces?" Unlike human vessels, which prioritize efficiency over comfort, Zelithian ships are designed as homes as well as weapons of war. We may spend years in deep space. It is important that we remain connected to who we are. The shuttle docked with barely a tremor, and Marcus found himself stepping onto a Zelithian warship for the first time. The corridors were wider than he'd expected, with graceful arches and warm lighting that created an almost domestic atmosphere. The walls themselves seemed to pulse gently, and he realized they incorporated some form of bioluminescent technology. "Impressive," he murmured, running his fingers along the smooth surface. "The structural integrity must be incredible if you can maintain these curves under combat stress." "You have an engineer's eye," Zareth observed with what sounded like approval. "Most visitors focus on the aesthetics and miss the technical achievement." As they walked, Marcus became aware of other crew members stopping to stare. Whispered conversations followed in their wake, and he caught fragments of what sounded like excited discussion in the Zelithian language. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "Your crew seems interested." Zareth's ears flattened slightly, and Marcus noticed her tail had gone rigid. "Word travels quickly aboard ship," she said carefully. "The crew is merely curious about our human guest." But Marcus sensed there was more to it than simple curiosity. The looks he was receiving ranged from amazement to something that might have been amusement. One young officer actually grinned at him before being quickly hushed by a superior. They entered a transport pod that carried them deeper into the ship's heart. The engineering section, when they reached it, took Marcus's breath away. Instead of the cramped, utilitarian spaces he was used to, the Starfire's engine room was a cathedral of technology. Massive power conduits formed graceful spirals around a central core that pulsed with contained energy. "By the void," Marcus breathed. "This is incredible. How do you maintain structural integrity with these open spaces?" "The entire ship is grown rather than built," Zareth explained, moving to stand beside him at the observation platform. "The hull is a living organism, bred for strength and adaptability. The engineering spaces are designed to allow our technical staff to work in harmony with the ship's systems rather than simply maintaining them." Marcus watched technicians moving through the space with fluid grace, their movements coordinated like a dance. They weren't just operating the equipment, they were partnering with it. "The power distribution network," he said, studying the elegant curves of the conduits. "It follows organic principles rather than geometric ones." "Exactly. Energy flows like blood through veins, finding the path of least resistance while maintaining optimal pressure throughout the system." Zareth moved closer, and Marcus caught that warm, spicy scent again. "Your people's approach is more direct but less efficient. You force energy to follow predetermined paths regardless of natural flow." "We could learn a lot from this design philosophy," Marcus admitted. "The integration of biological and technological systems. It's exactly what human engineers have been trying to achieve for decades." "And yet you succeeded where we could not," Zareth said quietly. Marcus turned to look at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "The chair," she said, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been vulnerability. "In 3 years of service, no Zelithian engineer has managed to calibrate it properly. You diagnosed and corrected the problem in minutes. That was just basic servo alignment. Any competent engineer could have no." Her amber eyes met his directly. "It was more than technical skill. You understood what the problem was doing too. Me, not just what it was doing to the machine. That is not something that can be taught." Before Marcus could respond, a young Zelithian officer approached them, her expression mixing nervousness with barely contained excitement. "Admiral," she said, offering a crisp salute. "The crew requests permission to address the human engineer." Zareth's ears flattened again, and Marcus saw her tail twitch with agitation. "That will not be necessary, Lieutenant Cass." "With respect, Admiral, the crew is most insistent." They wish to express their appreciation. Marcus looked between them, sensing undercurrents he didn't understand. Appreciation for what? Lieutenant Kess glanced at her Admiral, who gave a barely perceptible nod of resignation. For what you did in the conference room, sir, the entire fleet heard. That is, we all witnessed. They heard the purr, Zareth said flatly, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Marcus felt understanding dawn. The communications array was active during the negotiations. Standard protocol, Zareth confirmed. All diplomatic exchanges are monitored by the fleet for security purposes. When my controls slipped, every ship in the formation heard it. And this is significant because Lieutenant Kess stepped forward eagerly. Admiral Zareth hasn't purred in 3 years, sir. Not since the Battle of Kepler Station, where she lost half her command saving the human colony. The crew thought. We feared she might never. That will be enough, Lieutenant. Zareth's voice carried the unmistakable tone of command, but Marcus was already putting the pieces together. You've been in pain for 3 years. Not just physical pain, emotional pain. And that chair was just one more reminder of how everything felt wrong. Zareth's posture went rigid. I am a military commander. Personal comfort is irrelevant. Personal comfort maybe, but the ability to function at peak efficiency isn't. Marcus studied her carefully. You've been fighting on multiple fronts, external enemies and internal struggles. No wonder you haven't been able to relax enough to. He trailed off, understanding flooding through him. Among Zelithians, Purring wasn't just an expression of contentment, it was a sign of trust, of emotional openness, of the ability to lower one's guard. An admiral who couldn't purr was an admiral who couldn't fully trust or be trusted. The crew needed to hear that sound, he said quietly. They needed to know their admiral was still capable of ... He searched for the right word. Joy? Contentment? Trust? Hope, Lieutenant Kess supplied softly. They needed to know she could still feel hope. Zareth turned away, her shoulders tense. The crew's morale is not your concern, Chief Engineer. But Marcus could hear the emotion beneath her formal words. Maybe not, but your well-being is apparently. She spun to face him, her amber eyes flashing. My well-being? You invited me here. Remember? To see your engineering section. To discuss technical exchanges. But I think you really invited me because ... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because you needed to know if what happened in that conference room was real. And what did happen in that conference room? Marcus stepped closer, aware that every Zelithian in the engineering section was now listening intently. Someone who had been carrying impossible burdens finally found a moment of relief. Someone who had forgotten how to trust discovered they still could. Someone who thought they'd lost an essential part of themselves found it again. Zareth's breath caught, and Marcus saw her carefully maintained control beginning to crack. It was just a chair, she whispered. No, it wasn't. It was someone caring enough to notice you were uncomfortable. Someone willing to help without being asked. Someone who saw past the Admiral to the person underneath. Marcus's voice gentled. It was the first time in 3 years that someone treated you as an individual worth caring about, rather than just a military asset. The engineering section had gone completely quiet. Even the subtle hum of the ship's system seemed muted as everyone waited for their Admiral's response. Zareth closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. The Battle of Kepler Station, she said quietly. I made the call to save the human colonists. Lost 17 ships and nearly 4,000 crew members. The High Command called it a strategic victory, but you've been carrying the weight of those deaths ever since, Marcus finished. I stopped sleeping properly, stopped eating regularly, stopped allowing myself any comfort or pleasure because I didn't deserve it. The chair was just another reminder that I had failed them. You saved 60,000 human civilians, Lieutenant Kess said suddenly, her voice fierce with loyalty. The crew knows what that cost you, Admiral. We've been waiting for you to remember what it meant. Marcus felt something shift in the space around them. The other Zelithians had moved closer, forming a loose circle around their Admiral, not threatening, but supportive. Your crew loves you, Marcus observed. They've been worried about you. They need a commander, not a broken. They need their Admiral, Marcus interrupted gently. The one who cares enough about others to sacrifice everything for them. The one who just spent an hour showing off her ship to a human engineer because she was genuinely excited to share her passion for technology. Zareth looked around at her crew, seeing their faces properly for perhaps the first time in months. The concern, the loyalty, the hope, it was all there, waiting for her to accept it. I don't know how to stop carrying this, she admitted. You don't have to stop carrying it, Marcus said. You just have to remember that you don't have to carry it alone. And then, to the amazement of everyone present, Admiral Zareth Moonwhisper, veteran of a dozen campaigns, defender of the Outer Rim, the pride of the Zelithian fleet, began to purr. It started as a low rumble, barely audible. But as her crew stepped closer, offering their support and presence, the sound grew stronger. It filled the engineering section, resonated through the ship's living hull, and broadcast across the entire fleet through the open communication channels. Marcus felt honored to witness this moment of vulnerability and healing. Around them, the Zelithian crew began to purr as well, creating a harmony that seemed to make the ship itself come alive with contentment. Thank you, Zareth said when the moment had passed, her voice thick with emotion. I had forgotten what it felt like to be supported rather than simply obeyed. Your crew never forgot, Marcus replied. They've been waiting for you to remember. As they prepared to return to the Harmony, Marcus realized that he had just witnessed something far more significant than a diplomatic exchange or technological demonstration. He had seen the healing of a wounded leader and the reunion of a family. That happened to be a starship crew. The implications of Admiral Zareth's recovery would ripple through the Zelithian military hierarchy and change the course of the negotiations. But for now, Marcus was simply grateful to have played a small part in helping someone rediscover their capacity for joy. The journey back to the Harmony was filled with comfortable conversation about engineering principles and design philosophy. But underneath it all, Marcus could hear the subtle sound of contentment. Admiral Zareth was still purring, soft and low, like a cat that had finally found its way home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.